fully earn a customer and continually, relentlessly improve that experience so they never want to go anywhere and they all want to tell 2 friends and eventually 10 friends. There's no end to where that can go. And we can make a good case that majority of the most successful companies have done just that.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Corey, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Lee Benson. He's a best-selling author, founder, and the CEO of Execute to Win. With more than 30 years of experience, Lee has established himself as an expert in value creation, leadership, and strategic execution. He is known as the creator of the MIND methodology. Now that stands for Most Important Number and Drivers methodology. It's an innovative approach that helps organizations align their actions with core objectives, enhancing team performance and growth. In addition, Lee is also a sought-after speaker and has been featured in major publications like Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Inc. He shares insights on leadership and value creation through various media outlets, including interviews with huge outlets such as CNBC and Bloomberg. His best-selling book, Your Most Important Number, focuses on strategies for collaboration and execution in business. Lee, it's a pleasure. Welcome to the show.
Corey, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So first off, I want to talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, because you founded 8 companies, including growing Able Aerospace into a 500-person team before a pretty fabulous 9-figure exit. So walk us through, what's that journey been like?
I say it started when I was 6 years old, when a neighbor unsolicited asked me to pull weeds for 25 cents an hour. So back in the late 60s, that was a lot of money for a kid. And I call it this value creation cycle. So I would struggle to get a capability, build confidence, use that to create value, and I would just keep taking bigger steps. So as I fast forward, that led to shoveling snow. I fourfolded the amount of money I made an hour. Then it was a paper route, then 4 paper routes, then a dishwasher, busboy, cook. By the time I was kicked out of the house at the beginning of my senior year in high school, I was already self-reliant financially, and 2 days later, having an apartment was a non-event for me, at least financially. So I put myself through my senior year that way. I was teaching guitar lessons. Now fast forward, I graduate in 1980. I'm playing the first half of the 80s over 1,000 nights in clubs. It's how I made most of my money. I don't count it as one of my businesses, but it was like a business. Had a sound crew, stage crew, lighting crew, rhythm section that we would change out a few times. The band was really the singer and myself. And later in the 80s, I'm working as a supervisor essentially in this small electroplating shop, and had an opportunity to buy it for its debt in 1993. And then from there, it just took off. So I just kept taking bigger and bigger steps. And I'm still in the game. I'm still actually running a couple of businesses. I'm invested in several. I have an active role in several. And I love being on the front lines in the game.
Wow, that's quite a story. A little bit off topic, but I have to ask, what's the favorite venue you've ever played?
That's a good question. I love playing outdoors, so big concerts outside. I'm trying to think back what the venues would have been called. Don't even really remember now, but you can get 5,000+ people there, and that's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed 97. This was band number, 7. But in 97, I had a band called 3 Degrees West, and we played the Arizona Music Awards, and we won Best New Band, nominated 5 categories, had 2 record labels interested in us, and that was a fun experience. Yeah, a lot of fun.
I definitely connect with you too on the outside venues. I know that years before I moved out here to Colorado, people would talk about Red Rocks like it was this religious experience, and I remember the first concert there, and just, it kind of blows you away. It's definitely something special.
Yeah, for sure.
So going back to business, entrepreneurship, you've gone through, like you said, just sort of leveling up every time, right? Thinking about the value creation, finding opportunities, finding ways to expand. So what did all those experiences and wildly different kind of arenas as a founder, what did that teach you about leadership and value creation?
For me, it was all about creating value as an organization, even from the earliest days of having my, first business and building others. I thought of myself as the single biggest limiting factor. If I couldn't allow it to happen, believe in it, think it, any of that, it's just not going to happen. And so if I've got this company, which I sort of transformed in my mind, this is a value creation machine. Every one of the players, the teammates that I had, they had a job or they were a gear inside that machine. We need to be in balance, working well together and growing. And that's how I came up with this whole value creation piece. And initially, we need to make money and we have to be profitable if we want to stick around. But when it came to what did it feel like to work there, it kind of evolved into positive emotional energy, which is the X factor in my view for leaders, and it supercharges everything else that we do. And then this bucket of connectedness or spiritual value creation, what are we doing to strengthen relationships between team members? And the reason to do that is to unleash productive energy inside the organization. When people say, we want higher engagement, engage with what? And what are you talking about? A lot of times it feels like business virtue signaling to me. What I'm looking for is for every single team member to act like the CEO of their own role and be wildly productively engaged in what we're trying to do in terms of the value that we want to create, products and services. So that's on the connectedness side, and there's a lot of things that I've done and leaders can do there. And then for the positive emotional energy, this was the X factor for leaders. And so how well are they talking passionately about what's possible and engaging everybody in productive conversation and action to move in that direction? So it evolved over time into I need to be really good at all three buckets of value creation, if you will, material, emotional, and spiritual. And that will create the most value. And it has every single time for me. So the one example that you brought up, Able Aerospace, it was really two companies. Able Engineering was the biggest, Able Aerospace smaller. Able Engineering was a 9-figure, Able Aerospace was an 8-figure, but they were combined into one deal when we sold it in 2016 to Textron. But the multiple we got was amazing. It was almost 3 times what other companies in that space were getting when they sold a aerospace repair and overhaul company. Why? I believe it was because of us creating all this value in all 3 buckets and finding the perfect strategic buyer that could leverage it to grow significantly faster going into the future.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm struck by how you put it, that positive energy, right? Especially coming from the top, trickling down, coming from leadership. And I'm thinking at the same time, or at least I get the sense, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that what you're talking about is very different than just putting on my mask, right? Putting on my brave face for the town hall, stepping off stage, and then going back to, feeling the unbearable weight of everything else that, a CEO or a founder has to struggle with. Is that right? Or are you talking about something like a completely different mind shift than just a brief positive speech and a brave face?
Well, this positive speech, brave face, shouldering all the burden and the risk and shielding essentially the team from what could possibly go wrong, I think that's more normal. And boy, is that a giant mistake in my opinion. Huge mistake to do that. For me, it's all about transparency. We're all together creating value. Everybody has a job. They have a role to play in that, and we're all working together. And it was never, for me, I'm going to show up and hope I give a good speech. I want everybody to be genuine. I want, again, everybody to be the CEO of their own role. And even with 500 team members in this one company that we're talking about, Able Aerospace, every month, one day I would set aside for going through what the company's doing, where we're going, and each function and what they're doing. So I had a conference room that would fit over 300 people. So I would get that day in front of all 500 employees by function, and sometimes we combine a few functions. And that first half hour, this is where we're going, these are the challenges, here's what we're going after in terms of step changes and increasing the value that we create. The second half hour, each one of those functions would talk about what they're doing to fit in with this value creation machine to create the most value that they could. And this is where it evolved into this concept of the most important number in drivers in this MIND methodology, which we've actually changed to the MIND management system now, because it's so comprehensive. But every team is designed to create value. Well, what's the one number that's most reflective of the value that they're supposed to create and will drive the majority of the right behaviors? They all measure other things, 5 things, 50 things, but only to help make better decisions to increase the value they create or improve that one number. And so every team would say, this is where we started, this is where we're going, we're currently on track, maybe we're behind, maybe we're overdriving it. But it was an amazing thing to do every single month. In the few years where there were challenges, I would say, look, this came up, like 9/11, for example. Most of our competitors went out of business. We had to figure out how to get through it. And I said, if we don't solve for this in front of all the team members at this time, a lot fewer than 500, half of us or more are going to lose our jobs. But I know we can figure it out. Let's figure it out together. And I can tell you, every one of the team members appreciated that. They want that. And I adopted really early on, after reading Jack Stack's book, The Great Game of Business, open book management. So every single team member had a complete set of all the financials every single month. And if you didn't understand debit and credit or capitalizing things or anything else that might happen on the balance sheet, we'd give them a plain English version of it so they could understand it. So here's your department. We use this many rolls of tape. It costs this much. This many of these particular tools. It costs that much. And they made amazing decisions around being more frugal, basically just smart with the money that we spent doing that. So for me, we're all in it to create value. We all have a job to play. Stop pretending, right? Don't fake it. Keep it as transparent and open as you possibly can with the goal of creating as much value as we possibly can. Does that make sense, Corey?
Yeah, that makes sense. I like it. It's refreshing. Especially, I love the extra step too. And instead of saying, no, it's on you, improve your financial literacy, learn how to read a balance sheet, etc. We're going to give you some definitions too. Lower the barrier to transparency in a way. I've never heard that before. I think that's powerful.
The way I think about it, we create the environment from which everybody creates value. And if they don't get it, it's on us. I mean, if one person doesn't understand, but 30 people do, okay, well, that person may need some additional help. But if broadly they don't understand it, well, it's on us as leaders. We need to figure out what that is. And if I've got a lot of frontline team members that are, cleaning parts, machining parts, assembling things, they're not setting out to be financial experts. They're not going to be accountants. Let's give them information they can actually consume, but more importantly, use to make better decisions to create even more value. And that's why we did it that way. And shouldn't we all be striving for that? We create the environment. Let's continually improve that for everyone.
Yeah, I think we should. And you brought up, this seems to dovetail nicely because I want to get into the methodology a little bit more. And you've brought up a few times this the idea of every employee being the CEO of their own role. And I believe you mentioned, coming to those meetings, having that most important number, and then working backward from there. I've talked to lots of CROs on the podcast, and they tend to say something similar, but it's more like, you'll have your 6 to 10 really important metrics that you're zeroed in on. Of course, there might be hundreds of others that you're tracking, right? But those 6 to 10 you're looking at every week, that's your guiding light. But this idea of one number is really unique. So walk me through kind of how you came to that concept and why it's so transformative.
I think about it in this order: outcomes, structure, people. And people are the most important asset for sure. They create all the value, but I think of them last when it comes to setting them up for the most success. So if the outcome for the company is to grow its value by this much over time, all right, where are we started and where are we going? We can track that number. And for the entire organization, if we're just, saying in the for-profit world, it's profit, EBITDA, whatever the number is, let's call it net profit. And when companies sell in this particular space, hypothetically, they sell it for a multiple of profit. Great. Now, when I look at the structure below that, I've got marketing, I've got sales, I've got customer service, I've got operations, admin, all HR, whatever that is. They're all designed to create value. And when that value increases, it should accrete up and help with net profit. So same principle, every one of these functions, if you ask the question, how are you designed to create value and how do you know? What kind of an answer would you get? And for all the leaders listening to this, ask your team members, how do you create value for the organization? If they give you a job description, there's a huge opportunity to improve, like that we missed it big time. So if I go to marketing, and again, companies are different, but let's just say generally speaking, they're about qualified leads. And a qualified lead has to have, as part of the characteristics, a certain closing percentage. And their job is to continually improve the qualified leads that are coming in. And then I go over to sales, and they need to close this stuff. And they have a revenue number and a percent that they close, which matches with what the definition of a qualified lead is. And by the way, sales and marketing should absolutely be at the hip on all of this work. And so marketing is, over time, the number of qualified leads and improving the quality of it. Sales is profitable revenue growing over time. Great. So I've got each of their one numbers. And now I've got finance, I've got HR, I've got customer service, maybe you're manufacturing, so you've got all of that going on. What is that one number to really circle all the efforts around? Even though you're always measuring a lot of other things, but as I said earlier, you're only measuring those things to make better decisions to improve your most important number. So think about it this way, Corey, you and I buy a 5,000 employee company. It's all about, we want to increase the value of it, so it's profit, that's going forward. And we've got this function all the way across. Now we look at it and you can see red, green, or yellow, behind plan, on plan, at risk, for every one of the functions, and it's based on that number. And so we know instantly where to go and ask questions. So for me, once I can see where you started and where you're going and what that number is in terms of what you're measuring, the next question for me is, what's the best work you're doing to stay on track, get back on track, or overdrive it and create even more value? It makes it so unbelievably simple. And it's for us to look at and to manage and know where the challenges are, where opportunities are, but also for each of the teams. This is how we know. So if I ask a leader, how are you creating value for the organization? And they say, well, here's our most important number. This is why we selected it. And this is why it drives the majority of the right behaviors. Because you can pick a number, knock it out of the park, and it doesn't help the company at all. There's lots of examples of that. And then I ask a non-supervisory team member that's on this leader's team, how do you create value for the organization? They say, well, here's my team. This is our most important number. And this is my role. These are the couple of outcomes I'm being measurably held accountable to. And this is the best work I'm doing to help my team achieve their most important number. That's pretty darn powerful compared to what my job description is to move these 4 widgets over there, every hour.
Yeah, no, I agree, especially from the standpoint of aligning around something like customer value, driving that value in a strategy from top down, as we were saying before. I'm kind of struck, though, that while it's something, I feel like it's characteristic of extremely good advice, and that it sounds easy in theory, right? And you hear it, you agree, you're on board. And I also sense that putting it into practice, I can see where the pitfalls might come. So what would you say, Lee, to our listeners who are, they're like me, they're on board, they're thinking about it, it's already going in their heads, but how do they go about actually selecting that number and getting it right?
Yeah, well, I think there's 2 parts to that question. First, at the senior team level, are they committed to doing this? So it's a common way of creating value. And in this case, we see the entire organization as all these different teams or functions that should be designed to create value in a certain way and very intentionally. And when they all fit together, it accretes up, and we continually increase the value of the organization over time the way we want to. So they need to agree with this common way of creating value. I would say the single biggest obstacle to this not working is you don't get agreement at the top. So if you're not aligned at the top, what are you cascading out? And then leaders get very frustrated with, I can't believe people aren't doing what we didn't tell them we wanted them to do. And this isn't all laying out perfectly for me. So they're acting like victims instead of real leaders, in my opinion. So first, we need alignment at the top. And in my book, Your Most Important Number, the last chapter is a DIY chapter. I mean, this thing is designed that anybody can run with it. And I get communications from around the world regularly from leaders saying, we just adopted the language and it moved the needle in a big way. They would say things like, I started doing this and my team immediately challenged me and said, what does that have to do with our most important number? It's not, and it brings everybody back to the North Star. So there's that piece of it. And then I think, the other side of it, there has to be some level of discipline. You actually have to do the work. And I would argue that this is a lot easier to align people around than typical goal setting. And my experience says that traditional goal setting literally never stands the test of time. And The reason I say that is I've been able to peer into hundreds of companies doing this work over the years, and I look at the goals they set, and very few of them are really thoughtful goals that are going to move the needle. There are a bunch of activities they know they can accomplish, but it's not going to accrete up and create more value for the organization. So it just doesn't stand the test of time, and it feels terrible, candidly. Imagine, and there's so many operating systems out there, whether it's OKRs, 40X, EOS, scaling up, there's so many popular operating systems that try to be a one-size-fits-all, and that's why they don't work for most, will work for a few. And there's just lots of challenges. Like for every operating system that I hear people talk about, a few will say, oh, it transformed our business and it's incredible and it's amazing. There's always significantly more that say it hurt the culture, hurt the business, didn't work, we had to change it. I mean, that's universal that I've seen across the board. So it doesn't feel good to have a boss say every quarter set 3 goals, get it approved by your manager, rinse and repeat. Way easier to say you're on this team, this is the number we're all trying to win. It's like a football game score. And here's all these things we're measuring that you can influence to improve that number. That's so much easier. We're just relentlessly improving the value we create or increasing it by that number that we're chasing. Where'd you start, where you're going, and over time we're raising the level of value that we're actually creating. So alignment at the top, and then we actually have to have the discipline to do some of this stuff. And again, takes so much less discipline to do this over anything else that I've seen out there.
Yeah, I could see how that would be the case. And Lee, I love your point about has to be top down. I mean, that's something that we see all the time too, right? If you don't have leadership buy-in, and it's got to be more than an email, it's got to be modeling the behaviors, it's got to be really believing in what you're trying to set out to do and the strategy that you're telling everyone else you actually want them to do, right? You've got to participate yourself. And at the same time, I'm really fascinated by what this looks like when you do get down to that non-supervisor role that you were saying and talking about earlier, how even, that person not only has their team's number in mind, but also knows the metrics that they're going to be measured on that tells them whether or not, they're speaking to and moving the needle on that most important number. How does that work? And what do those metrics look like? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, there's a lot of tactical choices that have to be made, right? And so there's got to be room for failure as well. So how do you kind of account for roles that are more tactical and going through lots of tasks within a day or a week?
In this mind management system that I'm talking about, again, outcome, structure, people. So within the structure, that's where roles would be. And every role will have a couple of things. So you've got the name of the role, whatever you're calling it. You've got outcome-based responsibilities that should be measured. You have capabilities that you reasonably should have to have a shot at achieving the outcomes that you're responsible for. And then there's typically a job duties list, like these things have to be done, you can't let them slip. And for all these roles, even the more tactical ones, I've never seen one yet that you can't have 1 to 3 measurable outcomes that are their main outcomes. And the way I think about it is if we interview somebody, they want to come on board, hey, Corey, I've got this job for you. Here's how we're going to measure it. Do you think you can deliver on that and do it? And you're like, oh, yeah, for sure, I can do that. Okay, great. If it falls below this line, it won't work. Are you good with that? Because every role is critical, or why would we even have it in the business? Yep, totally get it. Usually what I hear is, if I don't hit that, something's wrong with me. Well, nothing's wrong with you. We would appreciate, that you tried, but let's hit the number. So when it falls below that lower line and we have the conversation, hey, thank you for trying, it's not working out. Let us help you find another job, whether it's in the company or somewhere else. There's very little argument. There's no surprise, coming all the way through it. So that's how I think about it in there. And what frontline team member or non-supervisor employee at any level has ever said, I want less clarity about what you want me to do? Like, none of them. They appreciate clarity. Most of the time, the bosses aren't clear. And then when they do get fired for performance, they didn't even know what that was all about, because leaders aren't strong enough to be candid about where they stand and what's expected when it comes to their performance. But if you follow this, every role has outcome-based responsibilities that are clearly measurable, and their training program are these capabilities. They should have enough to achieve those, but that's where we're doubling down to train them even more, and they don't drop the ball on these administrative things that every role has. That's pretty darn clear, and I've found that employees really appreciate that, Corey.
Yeah, I imagine that they would, especially like you said, Lee, if you give them the resources, give them the training to succeed. From my experience, that helps people not only know that you're investing in them, but also feel, right, that you're investing in them and their success. That coupled with the clear metrics, they know what they're going to be measured on. Yeah, I think that sets up people to have realistic expectations.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And so I think the only thing that's in the back of my brain and, looking at this from a more managerial lens is saying, okay, we've got these structures in place. Everyone knows what they're going to do. I've got a few direct reports. They all have 3 to 5 metrics they know they're going to be measured on. I want them to succeed. How do I thread the needle there between tracking, helping them stay on top of things, ensuring that they're going to reach their goal, and not kind of falling over into the trap of micromanaging them and things like that?
Yeah, and it's usually in this structure I'm talking about, never more than 2 or 3 outcome-based responsibilities, never more. And the team might have 30 things they measure, but I'm going to challenge that and ask the question, how is this measurement helping you make better decisions to improve the most important number for the team? And if we don't get a good answer, something like, well, this is what we've always measured and it's interesting. Well, if you can't articulate it, then let's stop measuring it. It really doesn't matter. But for each of these roles, this is your job to do it. So, I guess that's a choice, Corey. If you have to micromanage, is that because you don't trust them, or you've got, challenges as a leader that you need to shore up? And if you don't trust them and you're constantly surrounding team members doing it for them because you don't want them to fail, well, you're missing some big opportunities to spend your time in more valuable ways because you don't have a team that's capable, or a few team members that are capable of achieving what you ask them to achieve. So for me, one of my policies has always been, even with hundreds of employees, every single team member has to meet with their manager at least once a month for an hour. And the team member controls that. And you're talking about, one, hey, what's the biggest win since we met last? And then what's the best work you're doing in your role to help the team improve the most important number? And I can see the measurements. So at every point in time, the team member knows exactly, as I said earlier, where they stand regarding performance and what's expected. So there's no surprises anywhere. And the whole conversation is about developing them to be able to create even more value for the organization and all stakeholders, including themselves and their family.
I like it. That's an excellent answer. Okay. So going from the micro back out to the macro real quick. Over your career, you've implemented this framework with businesses of varying sizes, right, to tremendous success. What is one transformation that sticks out in your mind?
There are so many. One of the things that I do, because my whole purpose in life really is to promote holistic value creation behaviors and push those out into the world. There's a number of ways that I do it. And one of the ways that I do it is I personally run CEO mastermind groups. I call them Execute Masterminds. And it's a specific format limited to 8 members, and every 2 months, because we can do 4 each day, it's a 1-day a month commitment. We can do 4 deep dives in a day. And so every 2 months, we're going through everybody's business, and the goal is to responsibly and continually increase the value of their business. So there's lots of examples here, but there's one that the gentleman was a hired gun, and it was a client that 6 months into it, I found their president. He actually became their CEO, and it was a virtual staffing business, and grew the value of the company from the day he started. We valued it at independent valuation, 1.7 million. 20 months later, 48.6 million. And just incredible. I mean, just absolutely incredible. And there's a number of stories like that. That was probably the biggest one in the last 3 years that I can think of. But they're all growing faster because they're part of this process. And I've been part of other groups like Vistage, Renaissance, McKay, active with YPO activities, never actually a member, as well as EO. And I like their programs. I think there's huge value there from a community standpoint, but they lack in my opinion, the evergreen value of continually responsibly increasing the value of each member's business. Because of their process and what they go through. There's just so much more accountability here. But every one of the members, I have 3 full groups today. I'm starting another group in Q2. And I'm now certifying chairs to do this on their own and build groups. Fast forward 10 years, I really want 1,000+ chairs with multiple groups each. They'll be driving this approach to creating value through businesses, this holistic value creation approach. That's one example. I think that's incredible. I think that year, the lowest increase in value was about 36% of my members in there. But if you do this, it works. It just works. And the only time I've seen it not work is when the leader at the top won't allow it to happen. And there's a lot of reasons that can happen. When you're super transparent and open, because we're here creating value, all working together, everybody has a job and they should do that job well, including the CEO. That works amazingly well, but it exposes everyone. And there are a lot of leaders at the top, I'd say 1 out of 20 that I've worked with where they can't handle that. They can't, I don't know if it's ego or exactly what it is, but they can't be exposed. They just want to make decisions and leave the room, but not be held accountable to doing their job. And at the top, we have a pretty important job to do.
Yeah, you certainly do. And like you said, for whatever reason that happens, it's a shame. And you can immediately see the effect of when it does happen, when the leader is willing to commit and to be held accountable to the same standards as everyone else. I'd say from a cultural perspective, it's invigorating.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's a life lesson or journey that they're on, and hopefully they figure it out. Doing it the way that it sounds like you and I agree, they can make so much more money, have so much more valuable as a company, and feel better. They'll feel better, the team members feel better, culture's better, you actually have a lot more positive, productive engagement that way.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so as we near the end of the show, we have 2 quick-fire round questions that we ask every guest. So we're recording this in January 2025. So fast forward 5 years, what major change will happen in the B2B world by 2030 that we don't see coming?
I actually believe AI and all the marketing, tactics, techniques, everything that's going on, there's just so much white noise, everybody trying to get to everybody, that the trusted relationship-based network approach is going to be the most dominant and effective going through.
I like it. Yeah, you have to wonder, right? At what point is all of the content churn, all of the screaming for everyone's attention, the fact that we can crank out content like never before, and it's not bad. If you put some extra effort and human eyes on top of that, it can be pretty good. At what point is that going to become too much? Like you said, we're going to retreat back into networking events. We're going to want some sort of different form of media. I feel like it'll be intriguing to see how that one plays out.
Yeah, there's just too much noise out there. And so I say fully earn a customer and continually, relentlessly improve that experience so they never want to go anywhere and they all want to tell 2 friends and eventually 10 friends. There's no end to where that can go. And we can make a good case that majority of the most successful companies have done just that.
Completely agree. Okay, final question for you. If you could share one piece of advice with our listeners that you believe would help them hit their own targets, what would it be and why?
There's so many pieces I have to share with you. Let's go with business model. How well do you understand your business model, which is basically how do you price and it's the right price, you're not overcharging, not getting work, you're not leaving anything on the table by undercharging. What are all of the expenses and approaches to delivering your product or service? What's the profitability? And the exciting part, what's the potential for future profit? Do you really understand that? And can you communicate it in a way that all of your leaders understand? And then way more importantly, do all of your leaders understand it and how in their particular role they can impact it and refine and improve it over time? I find that in most companies, less than 10% of the leaders throughout the business fully understand their business model, if at all. So how do they make decisions every day to continually increase the value of the organization when they have no idea those elements that I just described?
That's fantastic advice. It's funny, right? I think that we get into these mindsets where sometimes we feel like things are a black box, right? You can't peer within it. And ironically, sometimes the business model and how you're going to further or improve that model as a leader tends to end up as one of those boxes. We all kind of, stay in our roles, do the same things, say the same things. improve a little bit on the same strategy, but we don't make those changes and we don't have that transformative thinking that's actually going to move the needle.
Yeah, in fact, I just updated my book a few months ago with an additional chapter that's titled Why Sometimes CEOs Fail, and the subtitle is Does Your Team Really Understand? And it's about four things, really. Do they understand the business model for the reason I just said? How they impact strategy, which are just approaches to increasing the value of the business? Do they really understand the actual value of your products and services? And what are customers saying so they can actually impact it and improve it? Most love their stuff more than their customers do. And then last is culture. What are we doing to reinforce the attitudes and behaviors that cause the most value to be created? So if anybody wants to pick up my book, Your Most Important Number, there is an additional chapter in there now.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds like it's worth it. Lee, thanks again for coming on the show. It's been awesome talking to you. You've already mentioned the book, so people can pick that up where books are sold. But if someone wants to reach out, learn more, get in touch, where should they go?
Yeah, go to our website, which is etw.com. And you can see the book there. You can find my podcast, which is titled Show Your Value there. You can see information on the Execute Masterminds that I lead and our other chairs are leading, plus leadership content. We're actually launching something mid-year this year called the Leadership Value Lab. And so all of these concepts of decades of me figuring this stuff out and refining the messaging around it so it's consumable and applicable through a lot more people, that's coming soon. But yeah, just go to etw.com and you can learn all of it. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Easy to find there.
Perfect. Easy asked. All right. Thanks again, Lee. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Corey.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.